Hey there, everyone. Art Burns here, wishing you well today. I've been talking a lot this week about, the cycle of the thoughts, emotions, and sensations of your body. I've given you a couple of practices, really two kind of steps of the same practice that is, just pausing throughout the day and bringing awareness to the thoughts that you're having and specifically where those thoughts are. Are you thinking about things in the future or are you thinking about things in the past? This is going to give you a good indication of your emotional state, right? Which now the second step of this practice is to bring awareness to those emotions, right? And notice, what it is that you're feeling and really try to name them. And that's not as easy as it seems, right? A lot of times, in fact, it's hard to even put a finger on what our emotion is. And the more often you do this practice and the more you kind of push yourself to find that answer, it's there. And the more you, kind of push yourself to find it, the more you're going to become more attuned and aware of what those emotions are. And that's giving you that emotional intelligence, as I talked about yesterday. Now, the third kind of aspect of this practice is the sensations of the body, right? And again, when you're doing this pause, and I, there's no overdoing this, right? It's not like you can do too much of this. So I mean, I recommend it. It kind of goes along with how much you're able and willing to meditate throughout the day. If you're somebody who doesn't have a lot of time to meditate formally, then I suggest doing this practice like 10, 20 times a day, somewhere in that range, for a minute at a time, right? So that you're getting that time of contemplative introspection, right, in a very positive way. And so as you're doing this practice, you're pausing, you're noticing, where your thoughts are, future or past. You're noticing what your emotions are. You're naming them as much as you can, and now you're checking in with your body. You're checking in, like, okay, that emotion. What does that, what does that feel like in my body, right? Because there's always going to be a connection, and there's a connection between these three things. As I told you, this is a cycle, right? The thoughts create the emotions create the sensations create the thought, and on and on and on and on, right? It goes round and round and round. And that's why we have moods, right? Like a negative cycle of this is going to be what we call a bad mood. A positive cycle of this is going to be what we call a good mood. Of course, the objective with mindfulness is to break that cycle and just be present, right? But the way to do that is to bring awareness to it first, right? Because once we become attuned and aware of the thoughts that we're having, the emotions we're feeling, and the sensations that they're causing, now we have the choice to just pause for a moment and change the cycle, right? We can actually change it. We can, stop the thought pattern of thinking about the worst case scenario every single time in every situation that we're in, and instead just realize that, whatever does happen, we can accept it and we can just be present with it, and we can meet it with a compassionate curiosity, which alleviates the emotion of fear and the emotion of anger and the emotion of shame and these kind of things, which then, eliminate the sensations that come with those things and breaks the cycle, right? And now we can be present, and we can meet everything that happens to us with presence, with acceptance, and with compassion, right? And so, ironically, generally speaking, it feels as though the sensation is the thing that's the easiest to notice in this cycle, right? Because it's what's happening in our body, right? So when we get that queasiness of our stomach or that tightness of our chest, or we feel ourselves breathing, shallow and heavy, or we get maybe a little headache or a tightness somewhere, these are physical indications, and this is oftentimes the easiest thing to see, okay? But the easiest thing to change, or the most convenient thing to change, I should say, is the thought, right? So it's funny how the two ends of the cycle, or two kind of periods of that cycle, are the ones that we can really, use to our advantage, right? So ultimately what this becomes, as I said the other day, this becomes emotional intelligence, right? And the more emotional intelligence we can derive, or cultivate, I should say, as a skill, right? Emotional intelligence is comprised of, essentially it's about self-awareness and it's also about self-regulation, right? It also includes empathy, noticing our motivation from our emotions, and also using that knowledge in like social skills. But those first two steps are the crucial ones, right? The awareness of it, and then the regulation of it, right? That is what allows us to take actions that are going to serve us, right? As opposed to taking actions that are not going to serve us, right? But there's something else that kind of happens under this sort of umbrella, that's really important to understand, and not necessarily so much to do anything about it, because it's going to automatically be affected by the work that I'm talking about here. But something I wanted to bring up to y'all and kind of, bring awareness to, and because this is very, very strong, it has a strong impact in our lives. And what I'm talking about here is something called empathic resonance, okay? Science is catching up these last couple of decades with what contemplative practices going back 2,500 years have been saying for the whole time, right? 2,500 years of practices have shown that that we are connected to one another, right? In a very energetic level, right? There's from the mirror neurons in our brains, right? So in other words, if let me briefly explain what mirror neurons is. I think I did a whole video about this last week or the week before, so I'm not going to go deeply into it, but assume that you watched me tragically slam my finger in a car door, right? There are neurons in your brain called mirror neurons, which are going to actually react as though your finger was slammed in the door. And for that, I apologize, right? I don't mean to be that sense of pain for you, right? And so this is part of something that we call empathic resonance, right? So in other words, when you walk into a situation, walk into a room, or approach someone, right? There's a resonance happening that's way outside of our consciousness, something we don't know, we're being affected by, and we don't know how we're affecting others, right? But it becomes a very cyclical and reciprocal thing, right? So generally speaking, when you meet up with someone who, if they're in this sort of down energy, right? They're feeling turmoil inside of them. They're feeling pain inside of them. They're feeling, self-loathing or something like that. That's going to impact you, right? More than you realize. And now this is where the awareness comes in, because you're going to feel something from that, right? You're going to get a sense of a physical sensation from that. And once you feel that, now you can be aware of how that's changing you. And again, you can elevate your own energy to try to, reciprocally elevate that person's energy, right? And again, I know this sounds very woo-woo and very, airy-fairy, but it's not, okay? Again, hard-nosed neuroscience is showing us that this is absolutely true. Like I said, it's neurons in the brain, neurons around the heart. There's an energetic exchange that we're going through constantly. And in fact, quantum physics talks about this too, right? That electrons that are separated by thousands of miles can if you reverse the direction of this electron, another electron that was separated from it, miles away, will reverse its direction too. So there's a lot of evidence in all kinds of disciplines of science that show that this energetic, kind of field that we all live in, and this energetic exchange is very real. And I'd like to give you some anecdotal examples of this. So some of you watching this may know me as the guy who owned the bagel shop back in Beacon, New York, right? So for about 8-9 years, I owned a bagel shop in Beacon, New York, a little bagel shop. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of work. It was hard. It was stressful. I was definitely, not the healthiest person I have been during that time, but it was a great, kind of aspect of being part of a community, and sort of, something about making food for the community was really, really beautiful, But I had so many indications of this, empathic resonance that I'm talking about here, right? And people used to come into the store all the time, right? And you never know who was coming in, right? Like you never had any, it wasn't like we took reservations and it could look like, oh, so-and-so is coming in at 3 o'clock. Yay, it's going to be great because they're always in a good mood, you never know who was going to walk through the door. And especially in times that were kind of slow, I remember a few times and talking to some of my spiritual friends about this afterward, people who were very attuned to this whole concept, and of course they believed that it was real, and we had very long conversation about this. But anyway, I would be standing there back to the door, kind of, cutting up a bagel and making a sandwich, whatever. And somebody would walk through the door, and I could literally feel the difference. Like I could feel that, like either good or bad, right? It went either way, right? But I could tell when somebody was in like a negative kind of, space, like literally it felt almost like the room got colder or something. And likewise, I could tell when somebody who was, joyous, walked into the room, now of course there's extremes, right? And like the people who are really, really happy, those are the ones that you really noticed, and the people who are really, really unhappy, those are the ones you really notice. Maybe in the middle it was harder to tell, but you always had this sense, and of course certain people, unfortunately, tend towards either the happiness or the sadness. So the people who are, kind of gloomy are unfortunately always gloomy, right? Or most often gloomy, right? So they would always come in with this sort of, it felt like a heaviness, right? But the thing of it is, right, and this was also confirmed by some of my employees, right, that some of my employees worked for other food places in Beacon at the same time, like pizza places, for instance, and they would tell me all the time that such and such customer who comes into the bagel shop seems like a different person than when they come into the pizza shop. And so this really gave me an indication of this empathic resonance that I'm talking about. And so many times I would find somebody come into the bagel shop, kind of with that heaviness and that darkness, right? But they would leave with a brightness and a happiness because I cheered them up, because I could tell it, I could feel it, and they could feel it from me when I gave them my positive energy and my happiness, and so this is just to say that this is something else to be kind of aware of, that you have this, right? You have this too. Every time you walk into a room or into a situation or into any circumstance in your life, right, you are going to impact the energy and the atmosphere and the environment in one way or the other, right? It's never neutral. You're always going to either impact it in a positive, uplifting way, or you're going to impact it in a negative, downward way. It's never neutral. Okay, and so in fact, Jack Cornfield in the book The Wise Heart, he has a great little passage about this. I like to translate it to a guitar shop because I've been in so many guitar shops in my life. But Jack talks about walking into a shop with violins, right? Now, generally speaking, in music shops, whether it's electric or acoustic, stringed instruments, you'll see a wall full of them. They're all hanging on the wall, right? So if it's a violin shop, right, you'll see many violins hanging across the wall together, right? And like in a line or maybe in a couple of lines, but usually it's like a whole wall, right? And so what Jack says in the book The Wise Heart, which I know to be true from guitars, is that if you walk into one of these rooms with all these violins in a row hanging on the wall, and you pluck one of the strings, each one of those violins is going to sound a little bit. Right? Again, I know that to be true about guitars, right? Like if you go into a guitar shop, an acoustic guitar shop, and you give that low E string a good pluck, which is the heaviest string, you're going to, you can actually hear the other guitars or banjos or mandolins or whatever it is. You can actually hear them sound with that resonance, right? And so the same thing happens with us, right? There's a resonance that comes from us, right? So you're going to either be a dark, minor tone, or you're going to be a bright, major tone and happiness. And again, it's never neutral. right? And so again, as we bring awareness, and this is a great message for this Friday afternoon as we're getting into the weekend, and most of us are done with our work week, and we're about to head into the positivity of the weekend, hopefully. Bring this into that, bring the awareness of this. And as you do these practices, and you bring awareness to your thoughts, your emotions, your sensations, along with that is going to be the awareness and also the control over this energy that you're outputting into the world, right? And so hold awareness of that. Know that that's what you're doing, right? And a lot of times, again, going back to my bagel shop days, there were times where, my employees, like, I could never figure out why they were so, they always thought I was in a bad mood, even though I wasn't, or I didn't think I was, but I was so, stressed about whatever was happening that, again, I was giving off that energy. And so if I had been aware of that then, as I am now, I could have made some significant changes, and probably had a much more, not only for myself, but created a more pleasant and beneficial working atmosphere for those people who are working for me, right? And so when you're at work, or when you're with your friends, or when you're with your family, right? Like when you're sitting down at dinner with your children, having this awareness of how you are, it's not just you. It doesn't stop with you, right? Like your mood, your state of emotional and intellectual and physical, being is going to affect them on some level. And again, it's never neutral. It's either going to be positive or it's going to be negative. And again, so the reason I say that is that when you start to bring this awareness and start to see this very clearly, right, you can now control it. Right? You can say, okay, yeah, I'm in this bad mood, but you know what? I'm about to walk into my house and I'm about to spend time with my children, So let me choose to change my mood before I walk into the house with the children. Let me take a moment and pause and break this cycle and let go of whatever thoughts are creating this emotion that is creating this physical energy. And let me let go of that and think, and ground myself into my body and into the present moment and break that up and clear that energy, so that when I come in to visit my beautiful children and my beautiful spouse, I'm in a good place. I'm uplifting their energy rather than making them feel, oh gosh, dad's in a bad mood, mom's in a bad mood, what's going on? Because the problem is, of course, with children, and I'm about to do a parenting workshop, so this is a topic I'm going to be talking about a lot. When it comes to children, they think that they're the cause of this bad mood, right? And so that gets very dangerous, because then they feel like they've done something and you don't even realize, this is not something that's spoken and deliberately examined, but it's this feeling that they're going to carry with them, and they can't process that, right? The younger they are, the less able they are to process it, and therefore the more impact this is going to have on their physical, mental, and emotional well-being. So if you have any questions about that or anything else I've talked about here today, please hit me up with a question, a comment, or a direct message, or an email, or what have you. I'd love to get into a conversation with you about this. Obviously, it's something I love to talk about, and I would love to talk to you about it. So thanks for listening. Hope you're well. Hope you have a great weekend. I hope the weekend treats you well, but I hope you treat you well this weekend. Take care, everybody. Have a great day.